Rain tapped against the windows of the Stag's Crown, an old pub 3 blocks from the barracks. Officers didn't come here. Too informal, too loud. But Reyes sat in the far corner anyway, hood up, pint untouched. The news flickered on a mounted TV. Still no official statement from the Crown regarding the incident at Buckingham earlier this week. While no footage has emerged, witnesses claim the tech mogul was. Reyes stood to leave. "You're him, aren't you?" A voice called softly from the bar. He turned. A man stood, mid-40s, unshaven, blue-collar coat. Eyes not hostile, curious. The one from the courtyard. "You're him." Reyes didn't reply. The man stepped closer. "I remember you." Reyes stiffened. "Fallujah, 2009, my convoy. You didn't fire. You made the call." He pulled something from his coat, an old military badge. "I drove the rear truck. You saved my boy." Reyes blinked. Slowly. It was the only time since the palace he'd allowed his face to shift. "Didn't recognize you," he said quietly. "People don't recognize anchors, just ships," the man replied. Then he raised his glass. "To the one who didn't shoot and didn't move." They drank in silence. Across the Atlantic, late-night hosts were circling like sharks. Jimmy Kimmel, Elon Musk walked into Buckingham Palace, tried to order a royal guard like an Alexa, and got body-slammed with a stare. Stephen Colbert. "You know how British guards don't move? That one apparently also doesn't bend to billionaires." Online, memes exploded. Musk yelling at a statue. Queen's Guard greater than SpaceX. AI-generated reenactments of Reyes blinking once and causing global recession. His PR team tried again. Elon respects tradition. Innovation means knowing what must never change. Comment section? Brutal. Too late. Still lost to a dude in a hat. Royal Guard, 1. Ego, 0. The inner guard wasn't about ceremony. It was about protection. Within the palace, far from tourists and cameras, Reyes now patrolled hallways lined with centuries of history. Not as a statue, but as a shield. Still silent, still precise, still being watched. But something had shifted. Princess Charlotte passed him once in the marble corridor. She paused, looked directly at him. "They're scared of what you reminded us," she said simply. Reyes nodded once. She left. Nothing more was said. But the message had landed. 2 days later, Musk sat for an interview with the BBC. It was pre-recorded. "Let's talk about London," the host said. "Ah," Musk smiled tightly. "The palace thing. You mocked a guard." "I challenged an idea," Musk replied. "Did you regret it?" He paused, smiled again. "I never regret a data point." The host leaned in. "They're calling him the man who moved you without moving." Musk chuckled. "That's cute, but I build rockets. He builds silence." The interview was never aired. Unofficially, because someone from the palace called. Officially, technical issues. Back in Reyes's quarters, a knock, a sealed envelope. No insignia, just his name. Inside, a single sheet. Some silences are stronger than laws. Thank you for holding. No signature. But Reyes knew the handwriting. It was the same script from the commendation he'd received after Helmand. Weeks passed. The storm faded. The news cycle moved on. But something didn't. At the base of the south gate, beneath a carved plaque, someone had left a single white card, handwritten. He didn't flinch, so we did. Signed, a daughter of the crown. And from that day forward, the tourists didn't just photograph the guards. They stood in silence beside them. For just a moment, not out of ceremony, but out of respect. Warrant Officer Callum Reyes stood alone in the throne hall, the seat of ceremonial British tradition. The room was empty except for one figure, Lord Halberd, the Queen's special advisor for military protocol. He gestured toward a small leather folder resting on a mahogany table. "That," he said, "is a formal letter of consideration for honors recognition." Reyes remained silent. "You understand the magnitude of that? A royal guard hasn't received individual citation during active duty in over a century." Still, silence. But that's not all. Another envelope. This one comes from Whitehall. Military intelligence is asking for your reassignment. Active field status. Joint command with NATO detail. Reyes finally spoke. "Why?" "Because you didn't flinch." "I wasn't supposed to." "Exactly," Halberd replied. "And the world noticed. Not for what you did, but for what you refused to do." Reyes looked down at the folder, then at the ornate carving behind the throne. "I serve the crown." "And sometimes," Halberd said quietly, "the crown serves back." Across the city, Elon Musk was not finished. He announced a return trip to the UK. The pretense, a technology summit, a renewable energy keynote. But everyone knew he was coming back to reclaim the narrative. He scheduled a press walk at Hyde Park, hinted at a gesture of goodwill toward the palace, and arranged a second visit, private, no cameras. The palace didn't confirm. But behind the scenes, the royal household's response was absolute. He will not cross the gate. 3 days later, Hyde Park, a stage, cameras, a carefully assembled crowd. Musk stepped out, smiling, his tone practiced. "I want to clear the air. I respect tradition. I do. But innovation, progress, it means asking questions. Why do we still have silent guards? Why do we worship stillness over solution?" The crowd was polite, but tepid. Then, from stage left, footsteps. Polished black boots. Scarlet tunic. Reyes. He did not march. He walked. Straight up to the edge of the platform. No rifle. No hat. just uniform, posture, and that unreadable stillness. Musk turned toward him, half smiling. "Back again, huh? Come to finish the photo shoot?" Reyes didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink, and the crowd grew silent. "Look, I'll say it," Musk continued. "You're impressive, all of you. The whole British Guard thing? Iconic. But it's theater, and the future doesn't need theater." Finally, Reyes moved, one slow, deliberate step forward, then another. Now he stood one pace from Musk. And then he whispered, "It's not theater if you die for it." Musk faltered. The crowd gasped. The moment teetered. Then Reyes continued, "You built rockets. We buried friends. You sell silence as a bug. We carry it as a shield. You fear ceremony because you've never stood still long enough to understand what it protects." Then he stepped back, nodded once, turned, and left. No fanfare, no guard. Just a man in red disappearing into a world that suddenly remembered why it had rules. The footage hit 13 million views in 4 hours. A single quote topped every social feed. "It's not theater if you die for it." News anchors tried to dissect it. Commentators debated it. But the world knew. The narrative had shifted. In New York, a former Marine called into a radio show. "That guard? That's what we meant when we said discipline, not control. Discipline, the kind that doesn't need to win to make its point." 1 month later, Reyes stood again in the inner courtyard, not as guard, but as instructor. He now trained the next generation, not just in formation, but in meaning. "Stillness is not surrender," he told them. "It's choosing when to move." At the edge of the yard, a small boy stood with his mother. He waved. Reyes saw him and blinked. Just once. Inside a vault in the palace archives, a new entry was placed in the Royal Guard record. Reyes Callum, Warrant Officer, decorated for ceremony and containment, 2025. Citation: held the line, and then taught it. London, 6:03 a.m. Rain, fog, silence. The call came through a secure line, the kind that bypasses regular channels. Warrant Officer Callum Reyes was already awake. He hadn't really slept. Discipline rarely needed an alarm clock. He picked up. "Windsor Command. High-level coordination request. You are summoned to Balmoral Castle. Immediate departure." Reyes didn't ask why, didn't ask who authorized it. He simply answered, "Understood." 3 hours later, he sat inside a jet-black SUV as it wound through the grey-green Scottish Highlands. The palace loomed like a relic of another age, still, regal, unmoved by time. But inside, everything was shifting. Because inside, they were waiting for him. Balmoral Castle was silent as Reyes stepped through its stone corridors. His boots echoed on aged flagstone. every step drawing closer to the chamber where tradition is debated, not declared. 3 figures stood when he entered: Princess Charlotte, General Sir Rowan Myrtle, Chief of Staff to the Royal Army, Alton Graves, Royal Strategist, and a 4th, behind them, the King's Private Secretary. No one spoke for a moment. Then Myrtle, "You've become a symbol, Mr. Reyes." Graves followed. "One we didn't authorize." Charlotte shot him a glare. "One we desperately needed." Myrtle folded his arms. "The Americans are requesting clarification. Musk's lawyers are threatening a formal complaint." "He made a mockery of our protocol," Charlotte snapped. "And Reyes made it global," Graves added. Everyone turned to Reyes, expecting something, but he stood still, like always. Finally, the King's private secretary stepped forward. He carried an envelope, heavy, stamped with the royal crest. "This is an offer, not an order." Reyes took it, didn't open it. "We want you to represent the crown, formally, publicly." "How?" "There's a state ceremony in 10 days. International dignitaries, press foreign monarchs, including Musk, who will be there as a global innovation envoy." A pause. "And you will stand as lead ceremonial guard." Another pause. "And if he steps out of line again?" Graves replied coldly, "You won't need to say a word." The next morning, Reyes walked the empty courtyard behind Balmoral. There, sitting on a bench beneath a leafless tree, was an old man in civilian clothes, fiddling with a folded red cap. Reyes nodded. "Sir." The man didn't look up. "They think you're the message," the old voice rasped. "They're wrong. You're the mirror." Reyes tilted his head. "Did you serve?" 17 years, Queen's Guard. 68 to 85. I stood through the IRA bombing threats, the Falklands, Thatcher's war parades, but we never had to do what you did." He looked up, eyes pale but razor sharp. "We never had to remind them why we were still there." A long silence. Then the man stood, saluted. "God save the king, son, and God save you." He handed Reyes the cap. It was his original service beret. "You'll know when to wear it." And just like that, he disappeared into the mist. 10 days later. Windsor Castle. The courtyard had been transformed. Velvet banners hung from battlements. Foreign leaders filed through the great arches, sultans, generals, presidents. The crowd of media behind rope lines stretched 3 blocks deep. But all eyes, in truth, were looking for 2 men. One in red, one in blue-gray. At exactly 11 a.m., the trumpets sounded. From the northern gate came Warrant Officer Callum Reyes. Scarlet uniform, medals aligned, bearskin cap resting with perfect symmetry on his head. The rifle in his hands wasn't ceremonial today. It was real. From the south came Elon Musk, escorted by 2 palace liaisons. He wore a tailored navy suit, subtle lapel pin, a Mars rocket crossed with a gold lightning bolt. The air tightened as they passed within 10 paces of one another. Musk slowed. Then he stopped. He looked Reyes over, head to toe. No cameras could hear what he muttered, but lip readers caught it. Back to the mannequin act, huh? Reyes didn't move, didn't blink, but the entire courtyard noticed. And so did Musk. Because this time, the stillness wasn't a wall. It was a judgment. The photo hit the wires in 43 seconds. Reyes standing, Musk sneering. Caption: "The future meets the foundation." BBC debated it live. Sky News labeled it "The Standoff Revisited." CNN had an op-ed within hours. Stillness as Power: How a British Guard Reshaped Global Authority Without a Word. A day later, Musk tweeted, "If tradition stands in the way of progress, it must yield." Replies: "He stood in your way. You yielded. You got stared into silence again? Even the Queen's dog shows more respect." Back inside the palace, Reyes stood in the green salon, where foreign guests were invited for informal conversations after ceremony. Uninvited, Musk walked in, just the two of them. No cameras, no aides. The door clicked shut behind him. "You're a myth now," Musk said. "The man who wouldn't move." "I moved once," Reyes replied, "and never again for less." Musk smirked. "They gave you medals for standing still. I launch rockets." Reyes leaned slightly forward. "Rockets rise, but they always come back down. What you call gravity, I call history." A long pause. Then Reyes added, "This uniform has carried coffins. Yours never carried consequences." Musk stared at him. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not shame, not anger, but for the first time, recognition. "You win," he said quietly. "It was never a competition," Reyes answered. "It was a lesson." That night, under crystal chandeliers, St. George's Hall filled with 100 of the world's most powerful figures. The air hummed with careful diplomacy. And from the gallery above, Reyes stood watch, this time not as a guard, but as a reminder, a symbol. Whispers followed him. That's him. The one who silenced Musk. He didn't even raise a hand. But Reyes didn't respond. Because silence, true silence, isn't just the absence of noise. It's the presence of meaning. Near the end of the evening, the king rose for the closing speech. His voice clear, measured, heavy with centuries. In a time when noise often masquerades as leadership, and spectacle is mistaken for strength. He paused, then looked to the gallery above. "We have all witnessed the quiet power of restraint." The room turned. Eyes found Reyes. "Let it be known," the king continued, "that sometimes the strongest move is to stand still." He lifted a glass. "To those who do not shout, to those who do not bend, to those who guard more than doors, but guard meaning." The entire hall stood in applause. Not for Reyes's name, not for his title, but for what he represented. Discipline, integrity, stillness. After the ceremony, as Reyes changed from uniform to civilian wear, he found a small black box on his bed. Inside, a handcrafted medal. No rank, no ribbon, just an engraving. For the man who moved the crown. And a note. You reminded us who we were. Now go teach who we can be. C.R. He didn't need to wonder who it was from. 1 year later, a small museum wing opened at Horse Guards Parade. No statues, no audio guides, just a plaque, a glass case, and a video that played on loop. Reyes standing, Musk talking, and Reyes unmoved. Below it, a quote. Real power doesn't speak louder. It simply stands longer. At the far end of the exhibit, a boy stood with his father. The boy stared at the image of the scarlet figure. "Dad," he whispered. He didn't even blink. His father smiled. Because sometimes, not blinking is braver than fighting. And in another corner of the world, at a much louder stage, Elon Musk delivered a keynote. No one booed. No one heckled. But for once, he didn't joke. He didn't interrupt. He didn't mention the Queen's Guard. Because some lessons stay learned, even by the loudest men on earth.